my first question to you, Vandana, is when you think about the future of food in the world, what is it that makes you most excited?
What makes me most excited about the future of food is the abundance and diversity of food that the earth has given us, and diverse cultures have evolved. And that diversity is systematically being extinguished at very high cost to the earth, because biodiversity extinction is one of the big emergencies, but at a very big cost to our health. Because we do know now that biodiversity on the land, in our fields, in our farms, and the biodiversity in our gut is the relationship of health. So that's what gets me excited, because I've been working to protect biodiversity for 50 years now. And the more it's pushed aside by those who want to make money out of seed, out of food, the more it comes center stage in our consciousness. And when I started this work and I realized the Green Revolution was monocultures, and I wrote Monocultures of the Mind, and I wrote my book on the Green Revolution, there were very few voices celebrating diversity in agriculture as the organizing principle of agriculture and food. But today, I think across the disciplines, it is the accepted science. Then, of course, you have the industrial exploitative system. I don't honor it with the word science, because science is knowledge. Propaganda is not science.
I think that sounds exactly right. To me, I have fallen in love with biodiversity as I've traveled the world and seen just the way that ecosystems organize themselves differently and with such wisdom, with such deep wisdom. Oh, thank you for sharing that. I think we need to look at the flip side of that coin, and I'd like to ask you, when you think about the future of food in the world today, what's causing you the most stress?
Well, what's causing me stress today is what caused me stress in '84 when I saw the first experiment of the Green Revolution explode in violence in Punjab. It's what caused me stress in 1987 when I heard the big poison cartel, as I call them, because they mutate so often that yesterday you didn't know there's a Corteva, and now suddenly Dow DuPont have become Corteva, and Dow DuPont have eaten up Pioneer and everyone. So they change their names so often. If you stick to their old names and their old monopolies, you don't realize how fast they are becoming new monopolies. The giants, four giants, poison cartel. And they talked about owning the seed through genetic engineering and patenting. And that's what started me on my journey of saving seeds. And 1984, and the Green Revolution disaster started me on my journey to seek a nonviolent farming. I just called it. I didn't know, my background is physics. My background is not agriculture. So I just said, this is violence. And I want ahimsak kheti, the non-violent farming. And I didn't know where to take me. But, along the way, it took me to all the systems, the organic farming. And today, I'm so glad for the word regenerative agriculture, because it tells you that it is not another input system. It is allowing the generative power of the soil, of the plant, of the ecosystem to unfold. So each time, what really gets me outraged at the dishonesty and the exploitation is what also triggers my deep seeking for truth and my commitment to follow that path. So if I do ecological agriculture today, it's because of 1984. If I save seeds today and biodiversity today, it's because of 1987. So today the watershed is everything that was wrong with the Green Revolution, the chemical agriculture, war chemicals brought to farming. They should never have come there. We didn't need them. Or the idea of patents on life and patents on seed, which in my country, we did not accept. And in our law, we say plants, animals, seeds and their parts are not human inventions. Therefore, they cannot be patented. And I worked with an ambassador in the GATT to get exclusions, which is why we could make these exemptions and say, no, we are not the creators of the world. We are members of an earth family where the other beings are all our relative, from the soil fungi to the pollinators to everything we can see and everything we can't see. The genetic engineering revolution was supposed to reduce, our dependence on chemicals. That's what the advertisement said. And just look at the amount of chemical use that has increased with GMOs. I think in the US, it's 15-fold, 1,500%. In Brazil, it's 10 times more. But across the world, GMOs increased pesticide use because they were designed for herbicides. Roundup Ready was designed to use more Roundup. Bt toxin failed, requires more pesticide. And I'm looking now at all these new phrases that are being thrown around at us: digital agriculture, precision agriculture, gene editing, which is just the new generation of genetic engineering, lab food. And again, the old myths are being played out. So when they made chemical fertilizers, Haber-Bosch, their slogan was, we'll make food from air, because now we can do nitrogen fixing from the air and we don't have to depend on land. That was the arrogance. The hubris was, we'll make bread from air. And in a way, the fake food people are saying exactly the same. We'll make food from air. We'll make food from nothing. But every one of their systems is a very energy intensive system, and it will require a huge amount of land acreages. When factory farming started in very recent decades, and they said more efficient, it uses less land. Well, it uses less land for the animal, because the animal is now in a prison and not on the free pasture. But worse, they hide the fact that 7 times the acreage of Europe is used as animal feed supply. But in other countries, in Brazil, in Argentina, in other countries. So the footprint is put out, and you just look at this much square foot is the space for the animal, and so it's efficient. So I've kind of, studied these externalities for too long to fall for this new trap of lab food as a climate solution, as a miracle that will feed the world. And partly because over these decades of working on food, I have learned to appreciate the richness, the taste, the goodness of real food. To see this spin being added to the other two, I just hope that the money that's moving from Silicon Valley, you want a startup to do a fake food, you can get 30 million like that. And I'm sure the soil food web has to struggle to bring the knowledge of the soil food web and the living soil. And yet the fake food armies are getting so much billions. And we do know that when money is put behind a false idea, that false idea is made a norm, not because it's true, not because it's efficient, not because it's good for our health or the health of the planet, but because that becomes the place where all policy starts to throw itself. I'm noticing in American schools, they're already feeding fake food, fake chicken nuggets, fake, So, big money has a way of distorting policy and distorting democracy.
Absolutely.
And I think for us, the Green Revolution was an issue of democracy. The farmers said we are being made slaves. GMO issues were an issue of democracy for corporations, Monsanto leading the pack. We're trying to decide the future of the world's agriculture and food. Now we have big tech joining with big ag and big poison to say this will be the only way. And that's why the voice of democracy, the voice of the democracy of the soil organisms, the voice of democracy of the plants, the voice of democracy of all the cultures of the world, the voice of democracy of people throughout the food system, from the seed to the growers, to the eaters, to the processors, all of us have to now find the unity in a good food system and protect it with all our creativity and all our resistance.
The unity of a healthy food system. I love that. So you mentioned, well, an idea that came out of for me that rose up from hearing you explain that question was that there are simple but false messages out there, and then, like at the Soil Food Web, there's complex but true messages. We have a complex but true word about the soil, message about the soil. So how do we work with to win people's hearts and minds that they should take time to learn a complex reality instead of accepting the simple lie that the corporate world is saying about food?
I think the beauty of complexity, which is the principle of all self-organized living systems, whether it be the soil or the plant or an ecosystem or a community, is that you find the truth by living it. And the fact that big corporations are neither living, the East India Company was created through Queen Elizabeth's charter in 1600. Corporations are fictitious people, they have a legal personhood, but they don't have a living personhood. And everything they do is then based on the fiction they are, with the end towards which this fiction, behind which are real people, 300 merchant adventurers, BlackRock and Vanguard and the asset management funds, they're real people. It's not that they're missing, but the front is fiction. And the fiction's justification for existence is to extract limitlessly and make money limitlessly and fool the people limitlessly, which is why we need simple messaging. Yeah. And of course, they have same people who control the media control the food. And I've just done a new book that's out in the United States. It's actually not my book. I just pulled it together. I talked to all my friends in different movements last year about how Bill Gates, it's already 1.5 years ago, how Bill Gates was really taking over every sphere of life, from health to education to food, all the fake food is his idea, including fake breast milk as a climate solution. Big one ag, he calls it one ag, Gates Ag One. And I remember that one because he announced in it, this was February 2020, he said, time is our worst enemy. And then if you think of that, what did the movements find? That time is about evolution, and time is about cycles, and therefore time is about life. And therefore time is not an enemy, but a friend with whom we have to walk along evolutionary principles and evolutionary laws, which are the laws of life. And it's because they're constantly negated by the simplistic, reductionist, commercial, misleading message. We'll feed the world, we'll feed the mind. They've gone on this for 50 years, we'll feed the world. And more people are starving today than when they started. 1 billion people are permanently hungry today. 1 billion people were not permanently hungry before the Industrial Revolution. You've got pockets of famine, maybe a drought, maybe a war, but it wasn't structural across the world in every society. And the people who are hungry today might be growing their food, but they're so locked into this debt system of buying external inputs, the machinery, the seeds, the fossil fuels, the chemicals, and now the data, the whole data selling through digital agriculture. So I joke and say, so first they began and said the land is empty, terra nullius. Then they came and said, oh, life is empty. The seeds have nothing in them till we put the Roundup resistant gene. Life is empty, bio nullius. I wrote so many books on bioimperialism, designing bio nullius. And what I see now with big tech entering the food system is basically what I would call maintenance. You don't know. The farmer doesn't know.
Mm-hmm.
The soil organisms don't know. All of you in the soil food web, no, you don't know anything. It's when we extract your data and put it through an algorithm and sell it back to you through your smartphone. And that's the new external input that's going to get you into debt. Yeah. And they want the whole world to fall down and say, brilliant new step. And I guess for me, my learning has been over so many decades and across so many cultures and so many kinds of people working in the food system, that I just feel, just like the Green Revolution was a false myth and it's blown over, the GMO myth is over. That's why they have to reinvent the new GMOs with gene editing. And I do feel this new convergence, they call it the fourth industrial revolution. I think if we keep doing our work with sincerity, with truth, with love and solidarity, this will blow over too.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned your background in physics and the long period of which you've been studying these things, and I've been struck by hearing in some of your words the power of recognizing that the world is what we make it, that there's a lot of potential for it to be whatever we decide as a group, and yet we've let a few voices dominate the conversation. So if we have a transformative message, a more food democracy message, how do we get that in front of the most people that we can? How do we change hearts and minds by accessing this information? I'm curious if you would brainstorm with me on that.
But, that's exactly what the soil food web is doing. I first met dear Elaine during the biosafety negotiations. The US and the biotech industry were trying to block an international treaty on biosafety. And Elaine and her lab had just done the study on the Klebsiella planticola that had been genetically engineered to eat up biomass and turn it into ethanol. Except that when you applied this genetically engineered Klebsiella, then it was eating the root biomass and killing the wheat plants. And her experiment was basically very decisive. I remember the meeting was in Madrid, and the Monsanto and you had a revolving door between Monsanto, and I think you still have it, between Monsanto and the government agencies. And the government got set up, and so we've tested it and everything's fine. But GMOs are safe. And I remember so dramatically Elaine getting up. We were all sitting at the back as independent scientists. She got up and said, my government is lying. This is the research I've done. Her research and her speaking in Madrid is what sealed the fate of the biosafety protocol. That's what led people to go on. So when you say, what is the message? The message has to be truth at every point, and it has to be spreading the knowledge. We do a course every year. We used to call it E to Z of ecological agriculture. We have renamed it as Return to Earth. Return to Earth, both in terms of living seed, of living soil, of living economies that are circular economies. And for a long time, while travel was possible and people used to come, we've had students of Elaine come for that course, so that's how the word spreads. That's how the knowledge spreads. I think single-handedly, Elaine has reminded the world the soil is not an empty container. Number two, trained such large numbers who are teaching others about the living soil. My little work on the living seed, the seed is not an empty container. I think each of us have to give our deep selves and then share that knowledge as widely as possible by multiple means. So when you think of the fact that we are, it's like a water body and we are little pebbles, but that little pebble sends out waves. And these oceanic waves will embrace. We are not like that suction pump, sucking the water out of the aquifer and leaving a desert. and a water famine. So because I have such deep a practice as well as reflections, that for me, food democracy and earth democracy are what grow through non-violence, love, and truth. And they grow. And in these 35 years, I have watched how, Green Revolution, when I critiqued it, I was the lone voice. When I critiqued patents and seed and took on the Monsantos. And by the way, Adam, that Wikipedia page has a lot of falsehood because they put people to change the truth. The four people, Seralini, who did the work on GMO corn and Roundup Ready corn causing cancer, which then got verified by the WHO. Well, they hounded him, and his Wikipedia page. Arpad Putsai, who just died, he did the first big study on biosafety. And he was committed to genetic engineering, but he saw, when he was asked to do the study by the government of UK, that the entire gut system of the rats was absolutely inflamed. And so he said, if this happens to rats with 3 months of feeding trials, what will happen to human beings who eat this stuff all throughout? So he, with his director, held a press conference, and it went all over. And if you go to his Wikipedia page, dear Arpad just passed away, he returned to Hungary. He said, I went to England to get freedom. I'm going back to Hungary for freedom, because under this corporate control, these societies are not free. They call the Wikipedia page of Arpad Putsai is called the Seralini effect. So they constantly change. Wikipedia is not terribly reliable. And then we found out that they actually pay people $10,000 a month, a group of them, to be after each of us. And the moment we make a correction, because Wikipedia, you can, my son made a correction that I've studied physics and even sent my degrees to the Wikipedia people. And it was corrected. And within 2 seconds, it was back to, she's not a scientist. So we have to stick to our truth and live it day in and day out and develop resilience. Yeah. I think what we learn from nature is resilience. I think the 3 principles for me that I've learned from nature. Number 1, diversity. Nature does not live through uniformity. Nature is not a monoculture. That's why we have the richness of diversity in the world. Number 2, nature does not work with linear extractive systems. Nature is always giving all the time law of return. The seed becomes seed. The organic matter becomes soil and then becomes organic matter as a plant. And the 3rd is resilience. And I think these are lessons we need to carry in our lives.
That's a wonderful way of saying those 3 central pillars that create stability in nature and the great ability to change and adapt. That's wonderful. And, I'm glad you brought this up about Wikipedia, because I think what happens for you activists out there is that there's always going to be somebody that's critical of your message. And you're right, there's being paid to distort that message. And yet one of the things that I've experienced from interacting with you is that there is a true passion. There's you see the world through a lens of justice, and Wikipedia can't change that. People will see your message, they'll know. In similar way, you brought up Elaine. Elaine, through her knowledge and patience, she took someone like me who had studied one thing, mycorrhizal fungi in the soil, and I love mycorrhizal fungi, but she expanded it out and helped me see the emergent properties of the soil food web, the strength that comes from all that. I'm so grateful for your wisdom and for her wisdom. You are both, though, on that activist side. And one of the questions I have is, when we talk about international trade, globalization, food policy, there's often a big focus on influencing politicians directly, on bringing a message. And that's very important. A lot of people don't feel that they have the power to do that, or they don't understand how they would start, or they're not interested in politics and governance. So what do we ask them to do as part of this movement? We have you phenomenal activists out there. How can everybody else join if they're not really interested in the political sphere?
You know, the different phases, both in one's own life, as well as in the life of societies. You know, the phase of the 90s is when we were sovereign countries. We were independent countries. And globalization was just being put in place. The rules of WTO had been written as GATT, but till 95, they hadn't been institutionalized. And then the next 2 decades is the deregulation, the creation of the billionaires, the creation of so-called free trade, free for the billionaires and unfree for everyone else, free for the corporations and unfree for the local producers and local markets. So that period was an amazing period to influence policy. Because, you know, we had governments that realized they had to protect their sovereignty too. And today around the world, I look, you know, and the World Economic Forum takes big pride in it, that we have stocked all the cabinets with our people of neoliberal thinking, that corporations first, profits first, extraction first, and the earth is there just as nature is there as a name to be used. You know, they have the arrogance to say half for nature. And I'm just thinking, so what will you do with the other half of the soil? Kill them? Yeah. Well, yeah. It's so mechanical. It is so divisive in a way. The beauty of the food system is it is everyone's system, not just. I think food can allow us to overcome anthropocentrism. You know,
we sure need it.
Not everything allows that, but food does. And I want to share with you, Adam. You know, years ago, I gave a talk on the ecology of food, sacred ecology of food. And I've done many books since then, but partly because, you know, I try and become relevant to my own society and culture. And I'm very fortunate. I have friends who go deep into these systems. In fact, I have friends who studied particle physics like me, and they actually done the best classic on the classics of India and the mythology and food. Let me just read you 2 quotes. This is from an Upanishad, which is a food Upanishad. Yeah, there are 3 Upanishads. From food, all creatures are produced. Yeah, beings are born from food. You know, soil organisms then give you the plant, which then gives you the food. Beings are born from food. When born, they live by food. Show me any organism that lives without food. On deceasing, and this is what I love, on deceasing, they enter into food. Soil thou art, and soil you will become. Yeah? So whether we look at it in this broad picture, and then the other one that I love is the giver of food is the giver of life. And then when we realize the mycorrhizal fungi is a giver of food, it's a giver of life. The plants, you know, a lot of talk on plant-based, but they're not seeing the plant in its ecological relationships with soil, with other plants, with the pollinators, with the bees. Again, they're extracting the plant, and like they took free animals and locked them into CAFOs, they're taking the plants and locking them into CAFOs for plant, which is the lab. I mean, you know, they're now using mycorrhizal fungi to make fake chicken and fake beef in the lab. So I think the freedom of species is so important. And because we are part of the earth and we relate in society at different levels, you know, some of us are gardeners and farmers, so we relate as growers. Some of us are, all of us are eaters. We can't escape from that. Yeah. So for those who don't want to get into policy issues, and right now the doors are closed for most people, except at the local level. You know, I've addressed the C40, which is the big local government body across the world. And I was an ambassador to the last conference of the C40. And they are totally with us on the philosophy of food. But the national levels are totally captured by Mr. Gates and Bayer and Monsanto. That's where the national policies are, because they've been stopped. The lobbyists are running the governments. So for those who feel want to influence policy, influence the local policy. I'm working with a lot of European towns and councils and mayors who are working a way to ban glyphosate, even though the top was bought. Macron has compromised, the German government compromised, but the base carries on and is not giving up, because people know the high cost of poisons and chemicals in our lives. As eaters, you can organize in so many ways. If you're a parent, organize that the children get real food in their kitchen. We are all living, even the rich countries are living through hunger. Hunger is now a global uniter. Everywhere there's hunger. So everywhere we have to be sharing food. And everywhere we have to become more creative in how we share food. Community kitchens. These soup kitchens, they used to call it. But I think so many people are now, during the early days of COVID, I remember, people had lost jobs. They were hungry. And they got together and started gardens to feed themselves. And the beauty of the garden is because, we have a farm that's like a garden. And my mother created a forest around our home where we grew up. When you have a garden, there's abundance. If I have mango trees and we have lychee trees, and it's so abundant, we share with so many of our friends. There's always enough for everyone. Whereas when you're in a commodity system, there's scarcity. And you'd rather waste 50% of the food in America than create a system of justice and distribute it. So my big dream right now is we should grow gardens everywhere. And caring for the earth and sharing her gifts should become the next phase of human evolution.
Absolutely. That's amazing. It's interesting how easily we turn to the economic as a basic understanding point that people have. It's just the conversation. I have 3 hens outside here in a nice little enclosure, and I try to feed them a lot of things from my garden. Right now I'm growing some oats in my garden that will go to those hens, and they produce a lot of eggs, more than I can eat. And so I give them away. And several people have said, why don't you sell these? You could go to the farmer's market, these are $8 a dozen. And I said, it would ruin it to sell these eggs. It would ruin it for me. I just want to have these chickens and give the eggs away to my friends. And I think, that's part of the mindset that needs to change, that not everything is a reason for extraction of money.
Exactly, Adam. And the point is, the minute you start selling, then you'll want 6. And then you'll want 200. And then you'll need a chicken battery. And the logic takes you to that exploitation. But also the logic of the exploiters, those who run the chicken batteries or the seed monopolies, are so scared of freedom. That, what was Monsanto and Bayer's whole energy? It should be illegal to farmers to have seeds and save seeds. And if they've spent 35 years trying to make it illegal for farmers to save and have seeds, I've spent the last 35 years saying farmers have a duty to save seed and share seed. And we have managed to create that culture and spread it. We've created 150 community seed banks. But while you're talking of your chicken, my mind is going to how I've had to defend, sitting far away, send notices of support to people in cities in Canada, US, where it was illegal to have a chicken.
Yep.
We've been through that, but it's because there were some courageous people who fought for the freedom to have a chicken in their background, that now people like you can have chicken in your background. And I think this is what I meant by scarcity. Once you start to become greedy for money, the consequence is scarcity. Whereas when you create life and have enough for yourself, it creates the knowledge of abundance, and sharing just flows. So the gift economy starts to grow.
Mhm.
And again, because I've had to work on these things for so long, what is called the economy is purely colonial extraction. That's what it is. They said the land is worth nothing, the people are worth nothing, the people are primitive, just take their land and put it to improved use. The bison roam free, that's unproductive. We've got to have animals all fenced up and now in prisons. So money making then became the very basis of economy. And Aristotle, I have a new book. It's out in Italy. It will probably come out next year in the States. I was asked to write on the economy of care, and so the book is on the greed to care. But I have a whole chapter on how did we so easily accept greed as the organizing principle of economic life. Yeah, and then of course, I went to the roots of it. Oikonomia, oikos, the ecosystems, the home, and ecology and economy are the same root. They're not supposed to be opposing, contesting systems. Yeah, it's oikos, our home, taking care of the home is economy. Knowing about the home of which you're a part is ecology, it's the science. Economy overall, economia, according to Aristotle, is the art of living. So when you have your chicken and you share your eggs, you are practicing the art of living. The minute you say, I'm going to sell them and go to the farmer's market, you are practicing something else. It is a diseconomy, and Aristotle named it as chromatistics. And I think we need to now start naming phenomena truthfully. I say industrial farming is war continued after the war. That's what it is. It's the continuation of war when they should have ended. Agriculture is care for the land. It should not be, I don't think we should put the two words industrial agriculture together, because war chemicals cannot take care of the land. In a similar way, we should take the word economy away from money making and give it the name that it is, a diseconomy that's create hunger, scarcity, poverty, and now increasingly throw away people. And I want to tell you a little story, Adam. So this must have been 25 years ago. Globalization was just starting to, and I was kind of traveling the world telling people corporate global rule will create this and do this. And in IFG, we organized Seattle protests. And I gave my talk. And there was this young boy at the back of the room. This was in Germany. And he was unemployed. And he got up and said, I now understand. You are free-range chicken who are being pushed into the chicken battery. We are chicken in the chicken battery who are being thrown out of the chicken battery. Let us meet at the door of the chicken battery. And then he asked me, what could I do? I said, well, the chicken give waste, cows give waste, there's organic matter, towns have waste, start composting. This young man has created a business of youth, unemployed youth in Cologne that recycles waste. And this picture that he drew, that the people of the North are being thrown out of the factory system, out of the capitalist system, out of their homes, out of their towns, out of their work. And here we are being pushed into that system when we are free producers. And that's why the Indian peasant movement that had a protest for 14 months was saying, we will stay free as producers. We are annadatas, the givers of food. We will not become slaves in other people's factories.
That's such a great message, and it fits with your entire history in this area, especially around equitable land access. And so I'm really curious when we look out at the world and we name it what it truly is, which is that land is disequitably distributed. What is our responsibility as part of the regenerative movement to facilitate a reassembly of our society? specifically around land access? What kind of thing? At Soul Food Web School, we try to teach people scientific principles and better management, but also the wider regenerative movement. What conversations would you like to see to facilitate equitable land access?
I think the first bit of the conversation has to be becoming aware of how short and recent this phenomena of land inequity is. Yeah. For my country, I know it very clearly, but it's exactly the same in the US. When the British took over our country, they immediately passed a law. The East India Company took over 1757. In about 40 years, they passed a law that all the land was private property of the United Kingdom. At that time, the company. It became company property. And our peasants had to pay a royalty, a rent. And that's how poverty came. And $45 trillion were transferred. The story of the United States is even more brutal. So we have to, it's just 200 years. That's how recent it is. Yeah. And we treat it as permanent also because history has been told in those distorted ways. So in India, we had, and every other part of the world had use rights. Yeah. Usufructory rights. Usufructory rights is you have right to the land. And sometimes these use rights went down, generation on generation, and it's the local community who decided. Yeah. His grandfather was farming here. And women and men have the same rights because women and men were both farmers. So use rights did not create gender inequality, and use rights did not create rich-poor inequality because the use of the land dependent on your working the land for care. Yeah, your body. Once the British took over the land, in America, they took it over, the cotton plantation started and that whole story, and land was grabbed from the indigenous people. Basically, that's what drove then after that the mechanization, because the land stretches became so big. First you had slaves, but once slaves weren't, available because of the abolition movement, then you had to have machines, and then you had to have energy slaves. So I do believe that the private property creation through colonialism is a very big error that needs to be corrected. Land is Mother Earth. Land is a commons for caring. It can be used in small portions individually, but the property rights in land are a big problem. Now, this then connects to another phenomenon. I helped farmers around Paris launch the Greater Paris Organic Zone because they're very organized as CSAs. The organic farmers have a group called AMPA, and they supply directly to the cities. And here they wanted to go ambitious. And this was just before the climate summit in Paris. And they asked me to come and launch this and inaugurate it. And so we talked at that point. And the idea was this. People in the cities have fancy jobs and have the money, but they're eating rubbish. In the rural areas, land is inequitable. And here are enthusiastic young people who might not be farmers by background, wanting to be farmers. How do we put those three ingredients together? And the way we thought of it was those with money should put their shares into buying the land from those who are not using it or using it badly. And then people who want to be farmers put their investment of effort and work. Now, the word investment meant making beautiful. It's only after the East India Company in 1611, it became making money out of money. So we've got to bring back usufructory rights away from tradable rights, away from private property. We've got to reclaim the commons. Second, we've got to bring investment back to its beauty of creating beauty. And the rights of those who make effort with their body and the rights of those who put financial inputs and the rights of those who put land are all equal rights. There is no hierarchy in these rights because the investments are all about contributing to the larger common good. Now, these are the places where we'll have to be very innovative. And I say this with confidence because, in India, when the British had left us so unequal and had created these big landlordism and zamindari, one of the Gandhians started a movement called Bhudan, the gift of land, where those who wanted to be part of justice started to give their land to those without land. And millions of acres were given through the Bhudan movement. You must read about Vinoba Bhave and the Bhudan movement. And our dear friend Satish Kumar, who started the Schumacher College, and he comes to teach at the Earth University, which he co-founded with me. He actually began, he was a Jain monk who then left and began as a volunteer with the Bhudan movement. I think we need, just like we have to, rather than food as a commodity, we have to think more of food as a gift, which we can share in abundance, grow in abundance and share in abundance. I think we have to start thinking of the land as a gift of Mother Earth, and a gift to be shared. And if two people will do it, and I know in US, there's a lot of buying of land for the land trust. But I think what we need is a new partnership, where workers have rights to the land and the production, where eaters have rights by putting some money in. And we need a whole new balance created out of the imbalance that colonialism, industrialism, and various exploitative methods have left us. I mean, I watch in the US and it breaks my heart. Most of the people with large land holdings are old. Their children don't want to farm. Their land is going to insurance companies and banks. It needs to go back to those who care. And that's where a collective thinking is needed. And everything good, Adam, begins with a small effort. It begins with a good example. You do it right in one place, then another place will want to copy it. And then another place and another place.
Yeah, that's a very valuable concept. The trick for me is I have some friends who are part of that current system, and they use agrochemicals on their growing operations, and they feel trapped. So I see them on social media complaining about the price going up 600% during the pandemic of all of their inputs, but they don't know how to do it a different way, even though they have good hearts, right? And so I spend a lot of energy talking to them about regenerative methods, and yet there's skepticism and there's that reductionist point of view, because that's how they've been trained to look at the agricultural system. And so sometimes I wonder, is it worth spending my energy trying to convince a skeptic? What have you found about that in your time?
Well, I think one has to respect everyone, and one has to respect those who are trapped in what is the war agriculture. I would not call it conventional because it follows no convention except a war convention. And they're trapped. Yeah. So very often they get attacked or ignored. And I think what is needed is a conversation. And, I have found a very simple way, when I started, and the same, farmers who started using chemicals, they say, oh, but I earn more. I said, let's sit down and tell me how much do you spend and how much do you earn? And we'd make a simple cost benefit and say, yeah, I'm losing. Yeah. So I've done this now 37 years of my life. Just do simple cost benefit, because the costs are made invisible. The farmer is bearing the costs. The benefits are exaggerated. And the true cost benefit ends up being a negative economy in the industrial system. The farmer is spending more than they're earning because the prices are falling of what they grow and the prices are rising of the inputs they use. That's exactly what you said. But meantime, they're made to believe that growing a commodity will bring you more money, just like the friends who said, sell your eggs, you'll have more money. The minute we start trying to do the calculus of life and the calculus of food systems, with one reductionist measure of money, the mind gets trapped. The mind in a way is like a CAFO. A poor mind has been locked into a concentrated animal farm operation and it can't think freely. So I think being compassionate with your friends and just doing the simple economic system and then bringing them to the science and showing them so much is possible. Bring them to a soil food lab course. Send them to Navdanya to our Return to Earth course in October. It's available. The courses are available on the Earth University website of Navdanya. And many of them have come as skeptics, many, and gone away and said, I'll try. And once they try, then the mycorrhiza speaks to them. The pollinators come back. Our effort, again, even in our work, Adam, we've got to go out of anthropocentrism. We've got to realize we have many, many, many fellow relatives to give the message. And, the minute we realize that we change that way, then surely we can invite, but we have to begin from a place of compassion and respect.
You're right. The earth speaks better than I do. And so I thank you for that reminder, because I know that I have had the chance to take some young people to the Kanza Prairie in Kansas, and it's an intact piece of the tall grass prairie with bison, and you can just see the magic of the place. There's 15 plant species every meter squared, if you count them. There's huge animals that are supported with no inputs. There's a change in the land if fire comes in or some other thing comes in that makes it beautiful, that makes the landscape beautiful. It's more than I could ever say. How as a movement outside of the personal, do you see our strategy about who to target next? Right? We've been working for decades on emerging this idea of regenerative agriculture, getting the philosophy. Who's our next target demographic in the world? Who can we convince?
No, Adam, I wouldn't agree with the word target. And I wouldn't agree with the word demographic. I think we just talked about the prairie with so much diversity. And we should start seeing society as a prairie with diversity, with different potentials to act. And there is no one place, because the world is living through so much uncertainty. My 4 principles that I have learned from my training in quantum theory: potential, not fixed essentials; non-separation, non-locality, the topic of my PhD thesis, not separation and localizing. There is no excluded middle. You're with us or against us, that kind of logic is very Cartesian. But most importantly, uncertainty. That uncertainty is the irreducible structure of the world. So do not panic. If there is uncertainty, recognize there are many options and put your best on the option you would like to achieve as a potential. Your contribution is to change the probabilities in the uncertainty. And that's where your action comes in. So given that there are young people under huge student loans, the dignity of farming, I have done this experiment. I was debating Bayer in Berlin. And this man said, we have to have digital agriculture because no one wants to farm. We've got to have farming without farmers, and no one wants to farm. And because I was debating him, I asked the hall. I said, how many of you would farm if you had access to land? 90% of the hands went up in that room. It was a big theater, 90%. Universities in the US, I tried the same. How many of you would farm if you had the possibility? Whole hall puts up his hand. So we've got to create a bridge between the seeking of the young people and the possibility of doing it. That's where the creativity comes in. Huge exploitation of workers on the big farms of America. Yeah. I think it can be a place where we start to create a new awareness of the diversities in our communities, including the diversities of investments that I already talked about, that the investment of labor and the investment of money are not unequal. They're just different forms. Yeah? And just like one grass and the other grass on a prairie is not equal or higher or lower, they're all coexisting in symbiosis. I think shifting to symbiosis and then saying everyone in society has a revolutionary role of transformation right now.
You're right. The call is to everybody. And I appreciate how you reminded me again that, because I have this business brain sometimes, but it's about the life. It's about the symbiosis. And we have to trust it. You're teaching me more how to trust that the earth has the wisdom. So thank you for that. We just have a few minutes left, and I have a kind of a fun question for you.
Sure.
I would love for you to share with us a meal that makes you feel comforted and happy. Something that you eat that you just feel like it feels like home to you to eat that food.
Well, interestingly, that's exactly the meal I've had today. Because, it is post-dinner time, nearly more past bedtime for me. But there's a lovely dish we call khichdi. And it's rice and lentils, all kinds of dals. Any dal, you can put moong or masoor, you can put any of the dals. And then put all the vegetables you want into it. So it's one meal, it's one dish that's a meal. And the beauty of khichdi is it's what you eat when you're sick, but it's what you eat when you celebrate at feasts. And it's what you eat when you don't want to make 10 chapatis and 3 dishes. Just put it all together. So for me, it is a celebratory and a comforting dish. Khichdi is my favorite.
Awesome. That's great. Well, thank you for spending time with us, here late in your evening, and really appreciate the conversation that we had. Every time I interact with you, I feel very awakened to some deeper thinking about these subjects. So with that, happy to say good evening to you. Good night.
Thank you so much, Adam. Thank you. And the best to the Soul Food Web.